Hey everybody, welcome back to Earth Ascending. I'm Dylan, aka HT Maven, and today we're talking with Adrian Walker Hall, who is a practitioner, a therapist, and somebody who's bringing a very powerful methodology into the world called 5D crystalline emotion. And as many of us who are following the human design experiment and the vast changes that are happening to our world as we move into 2027 and beyond, know the solar plexus and our emotions are some of the deepest areas of transformation, mutation, and evolution in our current human process. So today we're going to talk about Adrienne's design, how she got into this methodology of crystalline emotion, and to just learn more about how we can have a better relationship with our emotions. Welcome, Adrienne. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It is such a beautiful invitation. I'm so excited to be here.
Yes, and it's a invitation that is perfect for you because you're a projector and you're 4-6 profile like myself. So we are, caring networkers that have that really strong capacity to make that one-on-one connection, especially you as a projector with your laser focused aura. And our six line nature helps us to see what's coming next, to know what humanity needs, what humanity is going to need in order to continue to grow and evolve and make the transition into the future. So your work deals directly with facing our emotions, moving through our emotions, and basically having a kind of process that we can rely on or fall back on when we need to know how to work through some of the difficulties that come up with emotion. Kind of technology, because your personality sun is in gate 39. This is the ultimate gate of provoking the emotional spirit to either, come out to be seen or to decipher what's in the way of that emotional spirit being accessed and just fully embodied. And you also have emotional and authority, which I'm sure helps as well.
Yeah.
So I'm curious. I mean, you're an emotional being, so this probably was a process that started with you, I'd imagine.
Yeah. I mean, it started as probably with all of our gifts in a very early age, where I had the message from my mother, like, don't let your emotions rule you, which to a tiny psyche means don't feel, you know.
Yeah,
And then over time, I was always very curious about my emotions and also the emotions of the people in my family. And it became very obvious to me when I was in high school that I wanted to be a therapist. Like reading books and things, like I was like, anyone is capable of anything. You can understand it by just putting yourself in that person's shoes, and then you could see why they do beautiful things or terrible things. Like, so I've always been curious like this. And then I became a therapist and was a therapist for 17 years. And then as time goes on and you have your spiritual awakening, you start to see how emotions and spiritual things go like this, which is
hmm
part of what's happening in this evolution, the solar plexus mutation that's happening. So it's so beautiful how
yeah,
spirit just builds things, stacks our experiences to set us up to do what we're here to do.
yeah. I think something that's so powerful about your work is that it's so detailed and you're able to put words to a lot of the nuances to the emotional process that I'm thinking very easily be overlooked because of the intensity of the feelings or just the fact that we live mostly in our minds in a homogenized world. Well, because statistically we know that 50% of humanity has emotional definition in their chart. 50% of the world is carrying a really strong need to have a good relationship with their emotions. And as we look at the implications of what emotion even is, we're seeing that this is like the meeting point of our spiritual self, which is not just a conceptual kind of like, you know, angelic ghost somewhere, in our minds. Our spiritual self is actually the unlimited version of ourself.
Yeah.
And the whole this whole transformation process that's going on with the collective solar plexus is literally more of our unlimited energetic, spiritual soul self coming into our bodies, coming into these forms, and so powerful. It's displacing all of these ancient belief systems, codes, traumas, gifts, all of it. You know, it's kind of like almost pressure washing our DNA with this very high vibrational energy. But how does that look and feel to the individual? It's messy, it's confusing, it's even traumatizing. How did you start to track the nuances of the emotional process, and how did that evolve into this amazing understanding that you now have?
Yeah. Ooh, such a good question. I just have to share, like, when you're talking about the changes that are happening and like what you just described right now, just like fills my whole body with light. Like, it is so powerful. I'm just like, oh, like, this is amazing to be alive during this time and to have this experience in human form. Um, so when I started to track the nuances of emotion, what I was really seeing it as is emotions being like our GPS system. And so I started to see, like, through myself and through my clients working as a therapist, that certain emotions meant certain things. Like, when anger comes up, that's when boundaries have been crossed. And sometimes we don't even know what boundaries we
Hmm.
have until they've been crossed.
Right.
So it really started there. And then I I wanted to write a book. Like, I went through this whole process even of like writing a book about our human emotional system. And I wrote up like a proposal. I hired an editor, did all that stuff. And meanwhile, Spirit had different plans, and I got dropped into this opportunity to train my psychic gifts, which people had always said, like, oh, you're super psychic, you're super psychic. And I'm like, okay. But like, I didn't really get it until I started training them, and I was like, oh my gosh. And so I remember as I was training those gifts, I asked my guidance, I was like, what about this book on the human emotional system? And they were like, it's cool. Like, you can do it if you want to, but there's something way better coming. And I was like, okay. And then a couple years later, literally a couple years later, I went through a massive tower moment. And we all know what that's like, like Emotion
Hmm.
City. And I went to Mexico with a friend to be like, whoa, like, just time out for a second. And all of a sudden in meditation, crystalline emotions started downloading. And I started to see emotions as vibrational vehicles, and that every 3D emotion we have has a 5D and above counterpart. And that we're here to experience emotion. We make contact with the 3D emotion, but we're actually meant to evolve through it. It's not about
Hmm.
surviving it. We're meant to expand through it.
Hmm.
And that's where I had to leave the therapy world, because I was like, the therapy world is focused on surviving and coping with emotion, and that's so limited. That's not what it's for.
Yeah, right. And I think for the listeners and viewers of today, um, it's just really valuable to, yeah, really let that sink in, because our emotional coping mechanisms, like, I'm a human design practitioner, and I look at a lot of different people's charts, and I can see in those an emotional experience. Are they going to repress and shut down? Are they going to numb? Are they going to, um, seek overstimulation to distract from it? There's just so many ways in which we sell ourselves short when it comes to emotional experiences. And I'm wondering, why do you think it's so hard for us to feel? Like, what is this block that we seem to collectively have around feelings and emotion?
I really feel it's related to like how we've been conditioned around emotion. Like like the way people treat emotion is that it's a problem that needs to be fixed. And
Right.
I don't think that's like someone's fault. I think that just comes with our evolution of consciousness. Like, when we're in survival, if someone's having panic, then you're looking out for what's the threat, right? Because there probably
Hmm.
was a threat. So it's that we have more capacity now to be able to expand through emotion versus use it as a survival mechanism, like, oh, unpleasant, like
Hmm.
stop that, create safety now. And so we've just never been taught how to be with emotion. Like immediately when something unpleasant happens, we're conditioned to like squash that, stop that, look for relief. And that's normal because
Hmm.
emotions are physical, like we feel them as physical sensations. And if you have a physical sensation like you touch a hot stove, you pull away. But we haven't been taught the
Hmm.
distinction between a physical sensation that's actually a threat and a problem, like need
Hmm.
to engage safety protocols, versus an unpleasant emotion that is okay. Like we can be with that so that we can expand through it. We just haven't been taught, is my perspective.
Yeah, that's so important to see because I feel that those moments where we can transform, like through awareness, our relationship to what these feelings actually feel like in our body, that's when our nervous system is getting retuned to be able to hold more of this higher vibrational energy. When we literally give it permission and support it to say, hey, you can let through this experience.
Yeah.
Because I think still what happens is, like you said, that fight or flight comes in, and the nervous system, being so conditioned to be responsible for our health and safety, goes right into that threat mode and literally perceives a feeling or emotion as if it's a physical threat to our survival. And as we kind of ease into opening up to these bigger energies, it allows our whole system to transform. And I think that is actually illustrating where we're going as an evolving species. We're redesigning, we're re
Calibrating.
yeah, recalibrating our nervous system to become a higher octave, like you're saying, of a sensory organism. And the way that I've been seeing it is that we're moving away from this more, compartmentalized way of perceiving life. We have eyes and ears and a nose, and we can feel things with our senses, our physical senses, and everything is kind of separate. It's like these separate departments that sometimes come together if we're lucky to create a more symphony of an experience. But what source wants, what our evolution wants, is for us to have a full, a kind of integrated system, integrated sensory experience where there is no separation between the different departments of, like even looking at it through the human design lens, there's 9 centers in the body graph. And we can either have a very like fragmented experience of these 9 centers, or there can be this really deep, high definition cohesion that can come in.
Mm.
And I think that's what nature, that's what, our genetics, that's what everything is going to make us these more integral beings. We have these new kind of forms of humanity coming in called the raves after 2027. And it's not that every person born after 2027 is going to be a rave. It's probably than we would probably perceive right now, but there are going to be these new vibrations coming in, and their signature is that, they are the embodiment of not being compartmentalized or differentiated. Their consciousness functions with the full awareness that we're all one consciousness operating through different lenses, different filters. And while that's been a huge, important part of the experiment of humanity coming, up to 2027, we're moving into a space where we're becoming more unified. We're becoming more unified on an internal level within ourselves and our bodily systems, and we're becoming more unified as people and as a consciousness. So this work that we're doing with our emotions, in my opinion, is the most important work because it's laying the groundwork not only for us to have a better life of our journey, but it's opening the floodgates for a whole new experience of humanity to come through, and one that's very much needed because the separation, the disunity is the source of so much suffering, so much imbalance. That we know all this. So when when somebody is change their relationship with their emotions or embrace them more, in your view, what do you think the most important first step or intention, or, what is that starting point to begin to strike a better relationship with emotion?
I think first is really like understanding that no emotion is bad. It doesn't mean anything bad. Like, and I think this is a lot easier for spiritual people to understand because when you have a spirit, when you have that spiritual perception of like viewing things from the eyes of source, you understand that whatever is happening here is for us, even no matter whether it looks good or bad. So when you have that understanding of like there isn't good and bad, there just is, you can start to see that emotion is the same. And so I think that's a
Hmm.
beginning point, and it's something that has to be a practice. Like if your whole life emotion has been a like uh-oh, no, no, no. It's going to take practice every time an emotion comes up, like okay, this is okay, this is okay, there's nothing to protect from, there's nothing to turn away from. And then once we are allowing emotion to come and we're not seeing it as a bad guy, we can start to practice. My favorite question is, can I be with this right now? Can I be with the sensation?
Hmm.
Because the truth of the matter is that you have sensations all day long. You have the sensation of needing to sleep. You have the sensation of needing the bathroom. You have the sensation of being hungry or thirsty. Like you have sensations all the time. So why is an emotional sensation different? It's just the meaning we assign to it. And so really if we check, like most of the time the resistance is coming from what we think it's going to feel like. But if we're just with it in the moment, like okay, I'm
Hmm.
aware sadness is here. Can I be with that? Really what it is a pressure in my chest. Can I be with that sensation of a pressure in my chest? Yeah, I could do that. The thing that's the problem is what we're thinking about what that means. So it's really coming to like
Right.
simplifying it so much. Can I be with this right now?
Hmm.
And really like when we're in the current of our emotions and we're letting them really be there, it could be less than 60 seconds. It's like, do you have 60 seconds to let a sensation move through? I can't tell you how many times I've been with clients and I'm like, they'll be talking about something, talking, and I'm like, can we stop and be with this right now? And then they're with it, the thing moves through, and then they're like, wait a minute, that was like less than a minute. Like, is it done? Is it over? I'm like, yeah, you don't need like psychological surgery to make it happen. It's so much faster and easier than we think.
Yeah, it's crazy how the mind will just concoct so many definitions and like separating, compartments, and just like generate its own kind of like frenzy when we are feeling something unexpected, unexplained, or we can't trace it back to its source as easily. And that's because the mind just wants control. I think from that mental conditioning is realizing if we learn the strategies our mind is always using to try and keep its job, basically, then we get really good at being able to disarm those tactics and sink deeper into our experience instead of just analyzing, judging, or creating some kind of strategy to separate ourselves. Well, I mean, in human design as well, there's different streams of emotion, and that's something that I've been called into working with in more detail lately because people need the information. And there's individual emotion, which is very much about the highest highs and the lowest lows, and kind of this intensity of feeling, oh, my cup. Um, what allows me to, yeah, feel in touch with my spirit, that unlimited self. And I feel like that is just in my own personal perception. The individual emotion has a lot to do with things like a manic depressive cycle, as some would describe it, or a bipolar kind of energy that really, really high and really, really low. Perhaps in like, Western views of emotional cycles or whatever. But it's actually the gateway through which the mutation um, is birthing, because in 2027, this new mutation that's basically completing, it's been in the background, kind of rewiring us for generations. The egg is ready to hatch. And from that, we have a just different lens through which we start experiencing our emotion and our spirit. Um, and that's the particular um, wave that I carry. I carry the 55th gate, which is like the ground zero of this
Mm.
mutation. And what's interesting is you carry this the gate of spirit and opening up to, unity consciousness, to put it very simply. And the 39 is that energy that's able to provoke that spirit into displaying itself, like provoke the spirit into coming into being, as well as being able to put a hold on things and say, hey, what is not allowing us to feel our spirit? What's blocking us from feeling our spirit? And it's called the gate of the provocateur. So you and your personality sun and your line four, you carry the root pressure of the emotional or the individual emotional stream, which is the 3955. And I think that's really interesting because essentially it's like you're designed to be the one that forces people to look at this, even if you're not in the practitioner's chair. Your aura itself is going to poke and provoke people just by being in conversation with them. And it's really interesting because the 39th gate comes with this little adage that if people cannot handle the triggers that you present just by being, those are not your people. So just in terms of like your design, I'm curious if you've had that experience of being kind of the provocateur and having had to like just learn how to deal with recognizing who's ready for that and who's not, and what has that been like for you?
Such an interesting question. And I'm learning so much from you right now about all of this. So this is such an enriching conversation. Um, it's a funny thing because I think my original experience of being a provocateur was with my mother. And I would say things like, it felt like she was a highly sensitive person. She was super psychic, but she didn't know those gifts. And I could see things and I would say things and she would be like, stop that. It would be so provoking for
Hmm.
her because she didn't have the bandwidth to manage all of that and manage me and
Hmm.
my sensitivity. So that was a very provoking
Hmm.
relationship, and it's a beautiful relationship, the way we were able to heal over a lifetime together. Um, but because of that, I think I really, for a long time, tried very hard not to provoke, because it's scary. Like, those
Hmm.
were scary experiences with her. And so I really like shut that down or made it mean like I was doing something wrong if people had a reaction to me. And I think
Hmm.
more and more, even probably in the last few years, I've been more open to the fact that like, yeah, like I'm not trying to hurt anybody, but people are going to have a reaction and it's okay.
Hmm.
Being more at ease with the
Hmm.
fact that I'm going to push buttons and that's just part of what happens. As you said, like
Yeah.
what I do or don't do, like it's going to happen.
Yeah, it's like you have this hanging live wire that plugs right into the emotional system. And with so many people walking around with repression and suppression and etc., it's like it's a minefield out there for someone like you, perhaps, with this design, I mean. And and also it's like really well paired with being a projector because you're literally energetically formatted to see deeply into that other person and to know exactly the source of that trigger or that, blockage. And yeah, it's just so beautiful to see the elegant and eloquent ways in which all designs really do make sense. There's no design out there that is just like, oh yeah, it's not very good. It doesn't make it's no, it's like everyone has this beautiful, intricate story woven into it and has this really powerful intention behind it.
Yeah.
And in addition to that, you have gate 57 uh, twice defined by Pluto. Gate 57 is the most psychic gate, I would say. Yeah, there's a lot of like mental gates that have kind of a perhaps clairvoyant or clairsentient or claircognizant kind of thing, but the 57 is really in the body and it's in the splenic system. So it's about being able to tap into the just the subtle vibrations in the room or of that person's feelings or body. And to just instinctively know with that wisdom of the body that's had millions of years to evolve and accrue experience and understanding, like what's going on just in that moment. Um, Yet your authority in your chart is emotional. So you have the channel of community, you have and your emotions and being kind of like the emotional caretaker in a way, of your tribe, of your community, and being the one that's really here to be recognized and rewarded for that unique role that they can play. So it looks like you're living your purpose. Like it's all there. So we're moving into this new era that's also very like technologically driven and very digital and very simulated. And I'm just wondering like how as a species we're going to balance out intentional relationship with our emotions and yet have to deal with a more like a simulated kind of artificial way of organizing our lives. And I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts on that.
It's so funny because as you were saying this, I was like, I wonder if I have any thoughts on this, and then something popped in. So, um, but what's coming in is like there's actually a lot of simulation with our emotions already, right? Like if we take like what happens in our emotions and then the stories that we put with them, we're creating. And you think about like projection, right? Like you do something and I project onto
Hmm.
you based on what I know and what my history is. That there's a lot of simulation that goes on with emotion already, so I think that
Hmm.
as we and then there's emotion helps us connect to ourselves, connect to each other. And so I think there are aspects of that are already there that we've already been playing with. And perhaps what's going to happen is we're purifying our relationship with those things, purifying our relationship with emotions so
Hmm.
that we're able to recognize, have a simulation that's less distorted, right? And
Hmm.
living,
That's the
yeah.
word,
And
yeah.
then like the so much connection happens digitally, like even right now, like we're connecting through technology. And can that be purified? Can it always, be used for good, right? Because it's having such an impact on us, right? Like we have so much access to
Hmm.
information, so many different connections we can make. We will have to use discernment and purify that channel of connecting personally, like in our emotions, but also
Yeah.
digitally.
Yeah. I feel like, you know, a healthy way for me to think of technology lately has been that it's an extension of our consciousness. It's not this adversarial, fake thing that's like wedging itself in between us and our true nature. It's actually, and another great conversation I had on this podcast with my friend Tamu, he was saying that, you know, humans have always been defined by their technology, whether it was the stone tools of a long time ago to the computers and cell phones and all that stuff that we're using now, satellites. It's like we've always had such a deep relationship with our
Mm,
tools, and they've determined and defined and yeah, like determined history. So I think that, like in what you're saying, the more that we purify and relax into a coherence between the mind, the body, the emotions, the spirit all becoming one, and there's less distortion there, then everything that's an extension of us becomes less
mm,
distorted. And maybe these tools and these mediums actually can become, an enhancement or just like a clarification or a magnification, something that just allows us to tap deeper in or have an augmented experience of the beneficial side of these. And I really, like in my highest dreams, like in my 5D
yeah.
crystalline self, I feel like I really see a huge future there between almost like VR and emotional
Mm,
healing. Like being able to immerse yourself more deeply into the experience of emotion to kind of help move that energy and more deeply just like wrap yourself in it so that it's not just this. Because sometimes, in my experience, for example, like sometimes the emotion can just feel so like, where is it? Like, what, like, I can't quite put my finger on it, except the fact that I'm not flowing, I'm not functioning at the way that I
Yeah.
would like to be. And I almost feel like bringing more, into some kind of really holistic sensory experience, it's immersive of emotion to help us connect to and move through it could be a really powerful modality coming in the
I
future.
love that. Because I'm wondering too about you. I don't know about your chart. Do you have emotional definition or no?
I don't have emotional definition, but I do have my personality sun. So the main focus of my whole awareness is in the solar
Oh,
plexus.
oh, I popped out for a second. I heard you though. That's really interesting. I didn't know that was 55 was your personality sun. Like, wow. Oh, wow.
Yeah, so we have a pretty strong electromagnetic there. Mine's in the fourth
Yeah.
line as well, because I'm also a 4/6. And so it's been really an interesting ride for me in this life because, yeah, I'm not necessarily the carrier of the
Yeah.
emotion, but if there is emotion in the room, it's like my face is just in it because that's my whole
Right.
soul. So what I'm absorbing and amplifying through that open solar plexus has been like a lifelong masterclass in how to deal with
Yeah.
emotion, other people's emotions, how to guide others through their emotions, starting with my family, my mother, and she's emotionally
Mm.
defined, of course, life perfectly orchestrating the lesson plan there. And and um and even though it's been such a focus and I've had great tools to help me and a huge challenge to really decipher and move through and even though I don't have consistently defined emotional wave in my design, it's like I kind of feel like my whole chart's energy really moves like I am the emotional wave rather than
Mm.
carrying it. Like my whole design moves like that really extreme 55th gate. Part of my process has been learning to not fight the lows
Yeah.
because and not pathologize the lows and not turn them into a problem or something that needs to be medicated or sometimes it's just part of the wave, like for instance at the beach with the ocean, like you can't say, oh, no, no, skip that
No.
part, like just no, no, just keep the tide coming. No, it's like no, you have to let it go back out. And there are times where that's extremely frustrating and just like, your mind and your ego wants to have that consistency and productivity and
Yeah.
clarity. And it's just not necessarily possible, in my experience, and it shouldn't necessarily be an expectation, in my opinion.
Yeah. I really agree with that. And I think there's again that it's so insidious because there's the conditioning, the expectation of consistent productivity and clarity. But there it's
Right.
not even, as you said, like shouldn't even be expected. And so when that's not our experience, the immediate assumption is there's a problem, there's something wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And that
Mm-hmm.
is just like the word that comes to me is like it's inhumane. Like for us to
Yeah.
believe that we should be consistent all of the time. It's like that doesn't make any
Right.
sense. And it doesn't make any sense on like the design from spirit. Like spirit drops in experiences for us so that we can alchemize it, so we can metabolize it, so that it can become higher vibrational. Like this change is happening through us. Like our capacity is expanding. Like we have a very
Yeah.
like important hand in this process of being able to be with, as you say,
Mm-hmm.
like when you're in the low parts, being able to be with that because there's something so important happening there. There's something so important coming through
Mm-hmm.
you there, right? And it doesn't always make
Yeah.
sense, especially in the moment, like which
Yeah.
is again where you're talking about like the ego and the mind starts to, descend on that and be like, no, 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 and like stop this, and it wants to control it. And it's like, can't control that. That's beauty, that's life in motion. And it's like, can we be a vessel for that process to happen? Can we be the container
Hmm.
for that?
Yeah, it's really similar to even relating to one's design and the process of deconditioning out of the mind and into the strategy and authority, which operates through the body. And that's a process of surrender. It's a process of non-judgment. It's almost like a vipassana of letting your body's intelligence come back online and to not be afraid of that. And to just go back to what we were talking about right before that point was that something I've noticed is that in the low wave, people will come forward, people that know me and love me will say things like, I'm worried about you. Like, there's almost like they project this fear onto not being like, ha, ha, ha,
Mhm.
ha, not being the, one that's carrying everybody emotionally, which was my conditioning theme as the open solar plexus and feeling people's waves and highs and lows and feeling like I always needed to try and cheer them up or, coax them out of the darkness because I didn't want to feel their crap, because I'm absorbing and amplifying. And so I'm like, well, let's work through this so that I don't have to sit in it
Yeah.
with you. Um, and how that can like even to like the inner child having somebody express worry or concern for you around emotion can scare you out of wanting to sit with
Yeah.
that, and me having to like just advocate for myself with this greater context of the amazing tool that human design has given me, and being like, yeah, most people would you know force themselves out of this place by day one or two, or even
Right.
hour or two. And sometimes I feel called to go completely dormant, for 2 weeks at a time. And I fully know that on a deep inner level, perhaps I'm recalibrating or I'm downloading something into, the unconscious of my body that's going to come out later in the form of some new creation. And I think that's really important for people to see is that those down times are your closest connection with the creative intelligence of the universe, from what my experience
Yeah.
has been. Like a depressive streak, it's like when we stop casting in that light and we give ourselves a little bit of a greater context and a more loving um, just view of what that is, we don't have to fear it anymore. We can embrace it and we get more out of it.
Gosh.
We don't block those gifts that are coming in through that low or down cycle. And, I think it's also really powerful to embrace those times because it's where we're really close with, what one might call the divine feminine, the unmanifest, the non-linear, the abstract, the creative, the
Mhm.
right brain side of
Yes.
us, more in
Hmm.
aligned. The future is not going to be saved or helped, I think, even very much by just the mind. It's just not how the cards are laying. And so I just wanted to say all that to just invite everyone that's listening to reconsider and be more gentle with that side of emotion, the
Hmm.
contraction of
Yeah.
it. Because I think there's so much richness there, but it's the most unexplored piece of us as a
I couldn't
species.
agree more. And just to add to what you're saying, like I want to bring in some of the crystalline versions of the emotions that you're talking about. Like the crystalline version of
Please.
depression is inspiration. So when we
Wow.
metabolize depression, and it can be a problem, it can be time. You can be in that space for time that like
Yeah.
the fertile void is real, and it feels very depressing.
Hmm.
There is massive inspiration that is yielded from actually meeting those sensations, the experience of emotion. Because when you meet it without any need to fix it, change it, stop it, you're not interrupting its process. And so as it
Right.
metabolizes and alchemizes through your experience and your awareness, there's massive inspiration that comes on the other side of that, which is speaking to what you're talking about, like that that divine feminine energy of the no thing. Everything comes from that, you know? And then there's
Hmm.
also the piece of grief. So the crystalline version of grief is creation. So we go through these cycles, like specifically
Hmm.
talking to what you're saying with the, the waves, right? So when the wave is low, there is going to be a low part of the wave, like in whatever way that manifests in your life and your design, however it is for you, each person, I mean, individually, we have to go through every part of that cycle. There's no thing in nature that says like a flower blooms and stays like that. Like there's the ending, there's the completion, there's the grief that comes, and creation is on the other side of that. But if we don't allow the grief process to alchemize through the body and metabolize, there's a stopping in that process, and there's so much pressure that comes there, and things get hardened, and there's resistance, and that's where suffering comes in. So this part where you're talking about where it
Exactly.
goes into these low spaces, there's so much creation, inspiration that's there, but we block it by making it a problem or starting to get concerned about it.
Right. Right. And like the concern will can like filter through our projections and our own judgments of ourselves as like a failure or not keeping up or not living up to things, your expectations, these expectations that are never spoken out loud, ones that we just literally
Mm-hmm.
absorb from the ambient environment and emulate, and then live. And then I think that that's the place where we start taking unaligned action. And I think that's the dangerous part of not having a clear relationship with emotion, is that sometimes in the in between space of not having that clarity, we may be, and then we start kind of trying to do things as normal anyway with this really different vibration in our system, and it can have really adverse effects not only in the emotional system but just the total being. And I think that's something that I think that is a pandemic in
Mm.
our planet, a sense of like out of a lack of clarity or out of a lack of sense of feeling support in their emotions. And it's kind of accepted, it's kind of just accepted as, yeah, that's what we do. We just laugh about it, go to the bar and, party or go on the dating app or just, plug that energy dopamine hit or whatever, that
Mm-hmm.
oxytocin hit for the moment. And we have this populace of dysregulated individuals that are then easier to manipulate, easier to lie to, easier to force into compliance with things that are not true to us as human beings. And so I say all that to just put it into context for people that this is not just about you and your feelings. This is about your whole life. This is about your financial life. This is about your love life, your relationships. This is about the future of humanity. And like whether we show up as true spiritual beings in physical form or just a flock of sheep that are herded for, these core motivations that are very archaic and limited and are not really a reflection of our true potential. So the emotional work, even though it can seem very personal and very even like to some people's conditioned mind, like selfish or unnecessary, like, oh, you're spending so much time thinking about your feelings. It's like, well, actually, this is what's changing the world the most.
Yes, and I mean, it's so powerful what you're saying. Like I'm looking forward to listening back to this and taking it in again, because it's like it's such a huge deal what you're saying. It's what we do on a personal level has such a massive impact. Like it affects how our DNA is expressed. Our emotions are impacting our DNA epigenetically. Our DNA has been impacted by emotions epigenetically through our whole lineage. So when we have emotion
Yeah.
coming up, it's not just my emotion today. Like my irritation today. It's the incompleted irritation from generations. And I have the chance
Yeah,
today to metabolize that. I have the chance today to be able to alchemize that into a grounded truth, which is the crystalline version of irritation. It's like, it's not just about me, it's happening through me, but it's not about me.
exactly. And that's reminding me of, the end game of Gate 55, which is this unity consciousness. But in order to get to unity consciousness, we have to be willing to move through all the things that are still keeping
Mm-hmm.
us separate. And that has a lot to do with the epigenetic overlay, the trauma in our genes, and the fact that, many of us born incarnated at this time, you know, we are the ancestors from our line that came forward to
Mm-hmm.
break the cycle and not to, destroy anything, but to remove the blockages so that this pure flow of spirit, the most pure, creative, you know, unlimited energy of the universe, to finally make its way to the surface, to really begin to literally redesign our reality, redesign our physiology, our reality, our governmental and institutional systems, literally recalibrate the planet into balance because that was our blueprint to begin with. But we've been through a lot here. And so now it's just about opening, just opening to that pure source intelligence that wants to give us the next most beautiful
Yeah.
world. And that's that's a really interesting thing to contemplate, like in terms of like, oh, the bifurcation of timelines and how the world is going to maybe be going into, kind of two parallel or many parallel experiences of very different realities at the same time. And I feel like, yeah, if you really want to show it starts with this work
Mm-hmm.
here. It doesn't start with spiritual activation of the ninth sun of, the Pleiadian. I mean,
Super
that's
cool.
cool too. But in terms of it's yeah, I love that stuff as so much. But this is ground zero, where the actual change occurs is what we're
Yeah.
talking about today. So I just think I just want to continue to put emphasis on it for people. Like, if you don't know where to start, start here with your emotions. Even if it's a creative block, a financial block, a relationship block, it's all going to find its source with the emotions. And it's a beautiful and very fruitful process.
Very much.
So,
I wanted
um,
to just, do you mind if um,
yes, please.
we had such a beautiful interaction when we were scheduling this podcast. Do you mind if I share about it?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
was thinking about
So,
that. Go
because I
ahead.
think it really illustrates something beautiful because we're talking about emotions. Like there's the part of about being with emotions, but I've been talking to about metabolizing and alchemizing it and seeing what comes on the other side of it. And sometimes that's really hard to capture because it's so different. Every time an emotion comes up, the the higher dimensional place that you can land by expanding through it looks different. So it's hard to talk about it. And we had this experience, so I wanted to share it. So we had a couple of times where we rescheduled, and you said to me,
Hmm.
I think it was when we rescheduled, like for this date, and you said something like, I'm, I think you said, like, I'm sorry if this is irritating to reschedule. Do you remember that you said that? Yeah.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
I was reflecting about that and I was like, yeah, you know what? I've actually had an experience with a podcast where someone's rescheduled multiple times and it was very irritating. And I was like, so why isn't it now?
Hmm.
Like why isn't this exchange irritating for me? And I
Hmm.
was like, oh, because the way you were communicating with me was very transparent. Like there was no search for the truth because it was present. So when we experience irritation, there's a grounded truth that wants to come through. And because
Hmm.
you were already coming with that grounded truth, we just went straight to the 5D part. Like you acknowledged the 3D possibility,
Right.
but you just went straight there, and
Hmm.
I don't think you knew that the 5D version of irritation is grounded truth, but you literally just went right there by recognizing irritation could be there.
Yeah, that's crazy. And I mean, it's not crazy, but it's interesting because it's almost that, these codes are in your field and, they're available through interaction with you, even
Yeah.
over, Instagram. And maybe for another guest or another person, I wouldn't have chosen those words. I wouldn't have chosen that approach necessarily. Cultivated, it made sense for me to go straight into that emotional truth. Whereas for somebody maybe that didn't know as well, or that just wasn't the emphasis, I would have made it more practical. I would have made it more, superficial. But I felt like it was just, I don't know, it's just like the auras did the work for us. And I'm so glad that we did because my original, I didn't feel like I was ready to hold enough space for a big enough
Yeah.
conversation, just with the place that I was in my emotional cycle. It was just like, no, I don't feel like I could fully get all the goodies like right now. I don't have the
Yeah.
space for it. So, um, yeah, it's a very 4-6, like we're role modeling, the whole technology just kind of on accident, unconsciously with our
Yeah.
6 line. So I do
Yeah.
love
And I
it.
think there's, another benefit to it is that, like, getting to have that interaction is it creates such a connection. Like, I've,
Hmm.
I've known you for a lot of years, not like talking to you all the time, but I've actually met you in real life and all that. But so there is a level of comfort
Hmm.
there, but just having that kind of interaction, that kind of transparency creates such a beautiful connecting moment because you were also willing to be with what's there and just say, like, make sense of, like, I want to hold big space for this, and really honoring that. So it's
Hmm.
just like, what I want to say about it is, no matter what state we're in, we can always be honoring of emotion, and the honoring of emotion is what's high vibrational. It doesn't matter what emotion is present. It
Hmm.
could be the 3D emotion that's there, it could be anything, anything that you might even say is not good. No emotion is not high vibe. The only thing that's not high vibe is how we're relating to it. So just the way the interaction happened is relating to the emotion in such a high vibrational space that it doesn't matter what emotion is present. It's just the relationship with it that makes it high vibe. If that makes sense.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's really good for people to hear and remember, that, because people can feel guilty about bringing emotions into like a
Mm-hmm.
professional conversation. People can feel like that's irresponsible or like weak. And I think that that's a really, that just shows us that that's a really good place to lead from, because if we're living a life of authenticity and alignment, then we're going to want to see who doesn't want to work with us because we're talking about emotion. We're going to want to see who can't handle that, or contracts in relationship to that. Not from a place of judgment or rejection or exclusion, but just seeing it for what it is. Like who can play at our level, and who can be a real, like, live in spiritual maturity and be able to hold the full spectrum of the human experience and not just have it be about the result we're trying to get from the thing that we're doing, because I think that that's just missing the point
Yes.
clearly.
Yes.
So I would love to invite you to share with our listeners, how can we connect to you? What are some of the things that you maybe have coming up or have offers that are on the table? How can we work with you? How can we learn more about your modality?
Yeah. Thank you.
Please
Thank you
tell
for the
us.
invitation. Um, my very favorite place to hang out is on Instagram. So you're going to get the best of me over there. There's tons of great information for free on my Instagram feed. I love to hang out in my stories and give these examples of, like, how crystalline emotion comes up. So I will share on there. That's like my closest place to learn from me and interact with me on the day to day. there's something really exciting coming next week on the equinox, which is crystalline emotions. The way that they've been accessible to people before is if someone buys a library of them, which are like 50 audio journeys from the 3D emotion to the 5D version of it. So my guidance has downloaded to me what that journey looks like and feels like. It's like this energetic thread that you get to travel across as you listen to it. So before, it's just been 50 emotions in a library. And what's coming out on the equinox is finally my guidance is ready for singles to be available. So you can actually buy the single
Mm,
recording of that journey. So it doesn't have to be part of a collection.
nice.
And the reason why it's taken so long for it to come through is because my guidance was very clear from the beginning. Crystalline emotion is not for bypassing, cannot, like,
Right.
refuses to let this be in the world as a bypassing tool, because we have to have the, as you say, the spiritual maturity, the emotional maturity to be a good steward of emotion and then access the magic on the other side of it. We're not trying to skip anything. So the
Hmm.
the crystalline emotion singles collection will be available starting on the equinox. So there will be links in my bio on Instagram for that, and I'll be talking about that this week. So it's very exciting.
Awesome. I
Yeah.
can't wait to look at that. I think I need
Yeah.
some singles.
And one other place that I love to hang out is I do have a Facebook group called the 5D Crystal Emotion Facebook group. The link is also in my bio on Instagram, and that's where I hold all my master classes and give love there so people can deepen their relationship with emotion and feel new paradigm emotion.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, this has been such a just like a smooth journey through the emotional realm. It's felt so wonderful, and I'm just so grateful that we could connect over this conversation, over your work, which I appreciate so much. And I've noticed a lot of people that resonate with my work. Like if I share a post from you, people jump on with you, and I love seeing to see them like your stuff. And um, yeah, it's just we're really grateful to have you
Oh,
here on Earth sharing this wisdom with us and so important. So please, everybody, go check out Adrian's work, connect with her, and thank you so much for being on Earth
thank you so
Descended.
much for having me. It's been a true pleasure.
All right, everybody, that's it for today. We'll see you next time, and lots of love.